Welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Pooler, and my guest today is Diane Sare. And Diane is running for the United States Senate, and she's challenging Chuck Schumer. Well, Diane, that's quite an interesting feat that you're taking on a challenge. And when did you decide that you wanted to run against Schumer?
Thank you for, yes. I decided actually in 2020 that I wanted to run against Schumer for a number of reasons. The perpetual war policy, the Wall Street bailout policy, his defense of the lying so-called, I would say, misnamed intelligence agencies, and because of his stature. I think we're in a very, very great crisis. And he's the senator from New York. He's now the Senate Majority Leader. And I thought it was important to have a platform from which to address major national and international issues.
It's unfortunate, but I see the incumbents remaining in power cycle after cycle after cycle. How do you prepare us to break that?
Well, in part, I have already, and as you know, I'm running independent. I'm a 33 plus year associate of the late Lyndon LaRouche, which is a name which carries great controversy, as you're also well aware. I had, in the state of New York, you're not allowed to run unaffiliated. You have to create an entity under whose line you're running. It's the most convoluted thing. So I created the LaRouche Independent line. Then a group, actually the Republican Party, took over the shell of the Independence Party, which was thrown off the ballot, and tried to get back on. So now the word independent isn't allowed. So I am running under the LaRouche Party line. But the state of New York, and you probably are aware that the New York legislature is so eager to protect the money of the taxpayers that they are creating a $100 million matching funds slush fund, which doesn't go into effect until 2024. But they said we can't allow candidates that we might not agree with to get any of this money. We have to stop these so-called frivolous minor party candidates from getting on the ballot. So the Libertarian Party, the Green Party, the Independence Party, the Serve America, all got thrown off. And all of us, including myself, had this crazy requirement of 45,000 valid signatures in 6 weeks. And as it stands, we'll see the Independence Party filed 52,000, and I won't go into it here, but their signatures, there was a lot of fraud, I'll put it that way. I don't think they should be on the ballot. The hearing hasn't happened yet. And I say Independence Party, but it's the Republican Party. But I was alone in filing not 45,000 signatures, but 66,000, and not with a single paid professional petitioner, but a team of supporters who did just a phenomenal job and who are concerned, as I am, that there are certain existential questions like whether we're going to have a nuclear war, whether we're going to have major food shortages or fuel shortages, hyperinflation like Weimar Germany. These are survival issues. These are not partisan issues. And I think that's why I was able to get on the ballot. And I think that creates an interesting potential for the upcoming November elections.
Now, I know Howie Hawkins pretty well, and Howie's running as a Green for governor of the state of New York. And he's a seasoned politician, and he knows a lot of people, and he's running for governor this year. And he was not able to make the 45,000 requirement threshold. And if somebody who's been involved in politics for many years couldn't do it, um, what was it that people signed your petition that you could do it?
Well, it's I think it's one, the broad overview, the urgent necessity. This race is not about me, and I'm not saying Howie because I know him as well, and I really think it's an outrage, and these things should. I mean, the Libertarian and Green parties have been around for years. They've
Mm-hmm.
won elections. So the idea of denying them ballot access is an outrage, and I want to say that on the record very strongly.
Mm-hmm.
The advantage I had was the 50 plus years of Lyndon LaRouche's work in the United States. I mean, contrary to the slanders and lies in the press, we had a huge network in New York. We had people around the country. We had, before the government shut it down, a newspaper with 250,000 subscribers in the 80s. And we've been out in the streets. I've been a field organizer, besides being a trained musician, which is what I am by profession, whatever that means. I've been a field organizer for 30 plus years out on the street, and when you're out on the street talking to people, you develop a certain kind of thick skin, rough and tumble. So we had just a wonderful, dedicated team who had no ulterior purpose. We had no, apparently, one of the things the Libertarian Party ran into, and maybe the Green Party as well, is these paid petitioners. These petitioning vendors were kind of a scam. I mean, one of the things that the massive matching funds have led to in New York is not leveling the playing field, but a whole class of people who just try and get this money by doing jobs for elections. So I understand they had vendors who refused to turn in the signatures at the end, people charging outrageous, like $200 a day and only turning in 30 signatures. A mess. And I told my volunteers at the beginning, I said, what we are about to do is so hard that no paid person would be able to do this. You will only be able to do this if you have a passion about what we are facing. And the number one issue I made was nuclear war. We cannot have a nuclear war. This is not the way to bail out the banks. We shouldn't be bailing out the banks, and it's extremely dangerous.
Now my question to you is, like I had said, I know Howie, and Howie is an upfront guy. He's really a good guy, and he's, I don't think there's anything controversial about him. And he was not able to meet the threshold. But on your ballot line, Lyndon LaRouche was a very controversial figure. Um, how did you manage to get over 45,000 votes where Howie Hawkins couldn't?
Well, it's the power of ideas. And I think, frankly, Americans are waking up a little bit. They don't want war. We saw that with a lot of the, frankly, military support for Trump, I think, because he kept saying he was going to end the forever wars. And my sister is a veteran from Iraq. We have close to 3 million veterans in this country who fought in Southwest Asia since 9/11. That affects a huge number of people. And so I think that people don't believe the media. They actually respect someone if there's controversy. I think the controversy in a way helps because it indicates that you're serious. Um, and, I don't, but what I said, it's a 50-year organization that I had behind me,
Mm.
um, of tough, dedicated people who've been through the mill.
Okay, if somebody had walked up, to me, if I was walking down the street and somebody said, "Oh, would you sign Diane's petition? She's with the LaRouche Party." I would say right off the bat, no thanks. So no, I would. I'm
I'll
being
tell you.
honest with you.
No, I'm sure the people who said that to our petitioners, you can count on the fingers of two hands. And often people would take I had a little bookmark for a palm card, and they would take it in the store. They'd say, let me think about it. We had a case where one woman, this was reported back, I'm sure there were more, went in, came out, and she said, oh, she's with LaRouche. Of course I'll sign.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
So What what what's your platform?
Well, we have to put this system through bankruptcy reorganization. Declare the bank holiday. You're going to have to go through the debt. We cannot keep bailing out this derivatives monstrosity. And I think in a way that's partly what's propelling this war drive. Not to mention that you have people who are very committed, and you may consider this a conspiracy theory, but Prince Philip was quite explicit that he thought the world was overpopulated. And of course, one effect of banning poor countries from using fossil fuels. And here's the irony, you ban fossil fuels and then they're burning charcoal like those poor people in Haiti, right? I mean, what's more polluting? What causes worse health issues? So you have a bunch of bankers who've said, we want the world to be run a certain way. We want to discourage agriculture. We want to discourage dependence on fossil fuels, and we want fewer people on the earth. So the fact that we're about to have, I think the head of the World Food Program said there's 1.5 or 1.7 billion people facing famine, in part because of this conflict between Ukraine and Russia, but not really, because it's been the policy, and Russia is now taking heroic efforts to demine the Black Sea and get food shipments through. But you look at Afghanistan, I mean, this was a sick policy. We stole their money. It was in the Federal Reserve, and the US government just decided to take the central bank money of the Afghan central bank. That was a nation dependent 80% on foreign aid, and you just cut it off, and now they have 10 million children facing death by starvation. So what I'm saying is we should stop worshiping money. There's a metric of economy, which is the human standard of living, human existence, that people should expect that future generations will have a higher standard of living than we do. And therefore, we cannot allow this billionaire set to dictate policy and to push us, in effect, to the brink or over the brink of a nuclear war, because their system is in jeopardy and people don't want to go along with it. And you see the farmers protesting in the Netherlands, the taxi cab drivers in France. There's kind of a global resistance, but we need to have a plan for what the recovery looks like. You can't just say no. And that's why I love the model of FDR, because if you look at what he did, or you look at what happened at the original Bretton Woods conference, which was imperfect, we're going to have to do something like that. A kind of nations are going to have to come together. We're going to have to peg the currencies to gold or some other basket of commodities, fixed exchange rates. Every nation should have a right to have a national bank, to be food self-sufficient, energy self-sufficient. That's urgent. And yeah.
I had when I spoke to your campaign manager, we talked about a limited nuclear war. Tell us a little bit about that. That's pretty frightening.
Well, I'm really glad you asked, because there's a very important assessment which hasn't really come out in the US, but it was an article written in the Preußische Allgemeine Zeitung, which I guess is the Prussian, that's the newspaper in Germany, by the former Bundeswehr Chief of Staff and Chairman of the NATO Military Committee, General Harold Kuyat. And this was back in June, but I think it's very significant. And I'm going to share with you, I'm sorry, this is from a Google Translate, so it may not be exactly what he said, but the intent. So he writes, a few days ago, German media reported that Russian forces had simulated attacks with nuclear-capable Iskander missiles in the Kaliningrad Oblast. Now, here I am going to just show this map for a second, because I think people have to see what's at stake, that Lithuania probably, as the Russians have said, under pressure from NATO, because why would Lithuania want to put itself in a war footing with Russia? Here's Kaliningrad, and here is Lithuania, and you see you have to go through this little area between Belarus and Kaliningrad, which is part of Russia. And Lithuania suddenly said, well, we're just going to impose the EU sanctions, and we're not going to let Russia ship its own food and fuel and steel and things in effect within its own country. And also, I will point out that if you have Finland and Sweden joining NATO, and you have Poland, which is in NATO, and Lithuania, which is in NATO, you're talking about surrounding this. If I were in Russia, I might be thinking of the siege of Leningrad or something uh, extremely provocative, extremely dangerous. And the Russians have said that they are going to, this cannot go unanswered, that they will come up with some kind of response to it. And what this retired NATO general says is that he said the core issue is whether in a one-dimensional approach arms supplies should enable Ukraine. Well, there's two things that have happened. One, we said we were there to defend Ukraine, but we've changed our posture. Now the US and NATO are saying, well, it's not really about defending Ukraine, it's about destroying Russia, or quote unquote weakening Russia so they can't do this again. Russia has disavowed the first use of nuclear weapons, unlike the United States, but they have said a nuclear attack or an existential threat to Russia. And what Kuyat is saying is there seem to be two lines where one faction is saying, look, we have to say no nuclear weapons, we can't allow this to go nuclear no matter what. Other people are saying, well, Putin wouldn't really use nuclear weapons, that's kind of an empty threat, and we can probably get away with pushing all the way to the limit. He says if the Russian leadership is of the opinion that the use of short-range nuclear missiles will not trigger a nuclear counterattack by the United States, the risk of a nuclear first use for Russia would be calculable. And he said, obviously this is the case because the former presidential advisor to Yeltsin and Putin, Sergei Karaganov, recently stated, quote, I also know from the history of American nuclear strategy that the United States will probably not defend Europe with nuclear weapons. Now, I don't know that that's true or not. The head, Admiral Richard, the head of the U.S. Strategic Command, said when he came in with the new administration that he was moving nuclear war from unlikely to likely. I'm afraid we have people who are insane enough to think there is such a thing as a nuclear war, which is something LaRouche warned about in the 80s. By the way, he was Ronald Reagan's back channel to the Soviet Union. You may not know that, negotiating the Strategic Defense Initiative, which was his policy to develop a laser defense to take this mutual and assured destruction off the table. And the point is, the problem with nuclear war and deterrence is once it starts, you have to take out the other guy's ability to respond. So there is really no such thing. The thing would just be the end of the world in maybe an hour and a half, or maybe less. With the way our nuclear missiles are being pushed right up on the border of Russia, we're eliminating time for them to make a rational decision about what kind of counterstrike they would have to make.
So, do you think we're in July of 2022? Do you think July 2022 is far more dangerous than October 1962?
I do. In October of 1962, there were leaders who were capable of profound thinking, particularly in the United States with President Kennedy, his younger brother, certain journalists who played a key role. So we always had a channel to the Soviet Union, to Khrushchev personally. There was a direct channel. Look at what we've been doing with the diplomats. We've been expelling diplomats left and right. I think Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, said he hadn't had a conversation with Tony Blinken since February. That is exceedingly dangerous. How can you avoid war if you're not even talking to each other? And I think Biden's ability for profound thinking is a little bit questionable. You may know that 72 members of the press corps just wrote a letter complaining that they're not allowed to ask any questions. The White House correspondents, the ones who are allowed in, 72 of them aren't allowed to ask any questions. They said, why is it only a handful of, because clearly they have to keep the whole show from unraveling, I guess. So I think it's exceedingly dangerous, because if the President of the United States is not the one making the decisions, who is? And how is the world to know? Is it some crazy Dr. Strangelove in the back room? I don't know. And if I were another country, I would be wondering that.
So, you're running against Schumer, and there's many other senators and there's congresspeople who are aware of what you just said. Are they as frightened as we are?
No, I think there's sort of an aura of delusional deniability because of the crazy campaign finance laws or non-laws, lack of laws. Most of the people in Congress are millionaires. They are a bit out of touch with reality. I keep wondering, when is someone going to step forward and really blow the whistle? We have people, as you know, Ray McGovern and Bill Binney and Scott Ritter, and there are people. Julian Assange would be speaking. Look what they've done to him. There are people speaking out, but there have to be people on the inside who know more. And actually, one of the reasons I want to be on as much media as possible is I'm hoping we can persuade some of these people who know to come forward and help us pull the brake on this train that's about to go over the cliff.
Well, somebody like Chuck Schumer again or Nancy Pelosi, their pocketbooks might be a little bigger than ours, but in the face of a nuclear war, they're going to be vaporized just like we are, correct?
Correct, but do they know that? Do they understand that? I'm not
I
sure.
don't know. I don't know. So, have you ever run for office before?
I did. I ran in New Jersey about, now almost 10 years ago. I ran for U.S. Congress there in the 5th Congressional District, actually as a Democrat, but saying that Obama should be impeached, so that caused some controversy. And I
Why
ran
did you feel that way?
because of his, well, a lot of reasons. The war policy, I didn't see his foreign policy as being one bit different than Bush, killing people with drones, that kind of thing. I thought his health care was really a bailout for the insurance companies. We should have some kind of national single payer or some kind of program that gives people health care, not something that rewards doctors for putting you on a morphine drip because it's not expensive. So there were a number of reasons. I thought he was terrible. They overthrew the government of Ukraine and put a bunch of Nazi sympathizers in power. That wasn't so good. At any rate, and then I ran as an independent, actually against Christie, right after Hurricane Sandy in the 2013 election. And I said that I had a little cartoon showing Christie and Obama as sort of identical twins. I said they were the same thing.
Now, how'd you do with both races?
Well, interestingly, in the New Jersey race, the first time in 2012, it was a three-way Democratic primary, and in the two more rural counties, I came in second out of the three. I got 18% and 14%.
Oh,
And then,
wow.
yeah, and that really freaked out the Democratic Party, as you might imagine. And then in the Bergen County area, it was just awful. Some guy who never showed up, never came to a debate, and raised zero money, got 90% of the vote because he had the party line. And then I found out that his advisor was the former Democratic Party head who was in jail for embezzlement or insurance fraud or so. It's the corruption is amazing. It's no wonder why people get so discouraged.
Hmm. So, we just have a few minutes left. So, tell people how they can contact you, get involved in your campaign with effort and money and time.
Okay, well, thanks so much. My website is Sare for Senate, and that's spelled SareFor sareforsenate.com, sareforsenate.com. You can find me there. My campaign phone number is after the year FDR got elected, so it's 646 328 1932. That's 646 328 1932. That's the campaign office.
And how successful have you been in getting your message out?
I don't know. I don't know how to measure it. My Facebook followers have increased by an order of magnitude from about 1,000 to over 10,000. Um, we got out, I don't know, about 100,000 pieces of literature during that wild petitioning process. Everywhere I go, I'm now beginning to meet people who are familiar with me, not the majority, but the word is getting out. But these things are very hard to gauge, and I wouldn't expect the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal to say, "Oh, look at how Diane Sare is reaching the people." I don't think that's going to happen. So I don't know how I would measure that exactly.
Okay, so Diane, good luck, and I'm sure that we will talk again.
Great. Thank you
You've
so
been
much.
you've been listening to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Pooler, and if you like this show, um, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks, Diane, and thank you everybody for listening.